So it's hard. I think sometimes I have an unorthodox way of thinking, and I was tired of beating myself up against the wall to push things. And so this is where I feel like the universe started to make so much sense to me, because I never understood. Like, I used to be like, why did I go to medical school? How much further in my career would I be if I had gone to business school sooner? And it's really for this moment, I feel, because I don't do bro science. I do real science. I will check somebody very quickly. And I also have a great, list of accolades to kind of go behind my name. It's hard for someone to be like, oh, she just smoking to get high, and she don't want to do, like, that's like, you can't, it doesn't go with my brand.
Hey, this is Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Hey Dream Drivers, welcome to episode 123 of the Dreams and Drive podcast. And today our guest is Dasheeda Dawson, aka the WeedHead, aka the Cannabis CEO. And on this episode, Dasheeda is going to dive into her dream driving journey. She talks graduating from Princeton to eventually ending up in medical school, realizing it wasn't for her, going to business school, climbing the corporate ladder at companies like Target and Victoria's Secret, and then eventually leaving that all behind to carve her niche and leadership position as an entrepreneur in the ever-growing cannabis industry. So can you say wow? The theme for this episode and what I want everyone to get out of it is the idea that we are all trying to find our path, and sometimes the path finds us. There will be things in your life that you don't understand, like lessons and experiences that you don't know why or if they will ever make sense. Like, there'll be things where you're like, why did this happen to me? Why am I experiencing this? Why am I a quote unquote failure in this part of my life? And then years later, months later, you'll realize, wow, that experience I had was a lesson and is what I need now to succeed. And I think the episode was definitely eye-opening and educational for me as someone who's not a cannabis user, learning to think past my own stigmas, my own prejudices about usage, and just learning more about the plant and the science behind it. So our giveaway of the week this week, as I promised, we're doing a giveaway every week in the month of December. And our giveaway this week is with Dope Queen Cosmetics. And I want to say shout out to Portia for partnering up. And we're going to be giving away 4 lipsticks. If you want to enter, all you have to do is go to dreamsanddrive.com/win. That's dreamsanddrive.com/win. And this is the inspiration for starting Dope Queens. Portia was a teenage mother who graduated high school with a baby and then went on to eventually graduate from college at age 30. And she wanted to show her daughter that you can do anything you put your mind to. So if you're interested in entering the giveaway, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/win. That's dreamsanddrive.com/win. So I'm going to be doing a new segment, you guys, where I'm going to be highlighting another podcast. I love to share different resources with you all. So today's podcast that I want to share is Therapy for Black Girls. Therapy for Black Girls is your weekly dive into all things mental and personal development. You can join Dr. Joy Harden Bradford, who's a licensed psychologist in Atlanta, Georgia, each Wednesday as she discusses topics maintaining to mental health and helping you reach your full potential. Some topics that she has discussed include the importance of setting boundaries in your life, what to do when a friendship is toxic, exploring the reasons why many Black women engage in emotional eating, how to handle that ex that keeps popping up in your life, and more. And I think we as entrepreneurs need to put our mental health first. So the podcast is just a great way for you to think about ways that you can start doing that in your everyday life. In addition to discussing all things that are hot on the mental health scene, Dr. Joy also pulls back the curtain on the therapy process by highlighting what it might look like if some of your favorite TV and film characters were clients. Like, have you ever thought about what Mary Jane Paul or Olivia Pope would discuss in therapy? So check out sessions 3 and 11 to find out. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. You can also visit the website therapyforblackgirls.com, and there's a great directory on the website that I encourage you guys all to check out. And if you're feeling social, make sure to follow on Instagram and Facebook at Therapy for Black Girls. And then on Twitter, they are Therapy 4 girls. Also, remember to make sure you're following us on social. We are Dreams and Drive across the board: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And also, thank you to everyone who has shown love on the L video that I shared across social this past week and on the email list. So if you're not part of our email list, go to dreamsanddrive.com/join to make sure you get all those weekly updates from me. I shared something personal about my own story, and I was just overwhelmed by the amount of positive support and encouragement. So if you want to watch the video, I'll link to it in the show notes on the website and on whatever player that you're listening to this in. All right, so let's get into this episode with Dasheeda. Enjoy. Hi, Dasheeda. Welcome to this episode of Dreams and Drive. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Hey, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like it's been such a long time since we last spoke. So I think we connected a few years ago from your sister Imani, who I met at a TGIN event. Actually, our guest, episode 70 guest, Christia Donaldson, she had an event in the city, and I think Imani was there. And she was like, you have to meet or talk to my sister Dasheeda. And that's how we connected a few years ago.
Yes. That was when we were doing, I was the CEO of Tribe Called Curl. My sister started, she left corporate, started a blog, and it became a lot bigger, faster than I guess we all expected. And we eventually became like a consulting group and influencer combo. It was a lot of fun. But I'm glad to be connected now. What did you say?
Does she still do it?
Yes and no. So, we'll probably jump into some of that, but about a year and a half ago, I'm not sure if you heard, our mom passed away. And so that really, since it was a family business, that transitioned it sort of into a little bit of a sleep phase right now. Okay. We do still have some clients that we work with, more so behind the scene content generation. But for the most part, we haven't been as out and about as we used to be and influencing in that same way.
And we also have a mutual connection of you are also a Princeton alum. Yes.
Go Tigers.
Yes. So we'll definitely touch on that a little bit later. But I love to get our interview started with having our guests go back in time a little bit. So if I were to say who was Dasheeda, the 8-year-old, what would you say was inspiring you? How were you looking at the world back then?
Oh my gosh! Well, first of all, I just had a dinner with my first boyfriend ever and my ex-boyfriend, and he reminded me that I was just so grown and thinking, girl. And he's like, "Your age has finally caught up with your mind," because I really, I was like a grown person in a little person's body. I think very early on, around 8 or 9, is when I started to exert my confidence and general dominance, like in certain things. I knew that I had some capabilities and skills, and I didn't mind, flaunting them and, being the one dancing and performing in the living room for my grandma, my grandpa, and I think that their approval and love and support, and my mom being a champion of me, was always sort of what I desired at that time. For them to say, "Great job, Dasheeda." My mom had a way of walking in the room. You did good. She put it all the way on. "Great job, Dasheeda." And she'd say it just like that.
That's so important, though, right? In building your self-esteem and confidence as a young child, especially as a Black woman, as a Black girl. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, now that she's gone, believe it or not, like, that's the thing I miss the most, is hearing her say that, because she still said it up until, really probably the day she died, to be perfectly honest. But that's what drove me the most, was, really seeing that pride on my grandmother's face, my mother's face, and my grandfather, who was not really, he was pretty stoic. Mm-hmm. So to see him kind of be prideful about our, and I say my sisters, and our genius and our diligence and tenacity, he loved all of it.
So what was the dream as a kid, and how did you end up at Princeton?
Oh, girl, I was supposed to be a neurosurgeon. I knew that I was
What?
supposed to be a doctor, yes. And I was, everything was a scientific fact, as my sister will probably joke and laugh. She still tells me that. She's like, isn't it a scientific fact, Dasheeda? And I'm like, yes, because I started saying that, I think, around 10 or 11. It's a scientific fact. So I was a science and math girl from the door. And I, followed that path all the way through to college, where I majored in molecular biology at Princeton. So I was mobile and in the lab all the time, but at the same time, still BAC and dancing. And, Black Arts Company was one of the companies on campus.
Yes, I was BAC too.
Oh, shout out to BAC. BAC what? But no, I knew that I really still loved performing, but for me, it was all about, I never was like, oh, I'm going to grow up and be this great dancer, even though I was at Dance Theater Harlem, or I never thought I would be a great pianist or like what Alicia Keys is now, this performer, even though I did perform like that. I really thought I was going to make some sort of run at a cure for cancer. And that's on the way to becoming a neurosurgeon. So I had some very, very big ideas early.
So upon graduating from Princeton, you studied molecular biology, right? Mm-hmm. What was the decision, or what was the path post Princeton?
The path, if I'm being perfectly honest, and this is one of the things that I always remind my son, who is now going into his teenage years as a 14-year-old, the path was completely rocky and just sort of, I fought the universe a lot. But I had to do what I had to do because that was the experience I needed to have. But I really was tired of science when I got out. I mean, by the time you finish your thesis, and I did a research one, it was like time for me to do something else. I feel I'm right brain and left brain, and I wasn't getting enough of a balance. So I went to the United Way, and there is where I got really immersed in the digital world as a marketing manager. We didn't call it digital marketing manager, but that's exactly what I was doing. I was building websites before, we still had Netscape. It was still Ethernet cords. There wasn't Wi-Fi. And I got into really how you speak to layman folks, or layman terms about technology. And so really understanding how to market it internally and externally, because we always had to sell it, sell a new thing. So I worked for Teaming for Technology, and, I anticipated I was going to go back to medical school. This was supposed to be my break, if you will. Right.
So I'm guessing that never happened.
I did go to medical school.
You did?
I did.
Okay. Sorry for rushing the story. I mean,
it is a story. I feel like I need to write a book, but what I feel like I learned through all of it is that you don't, just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. You need to do what makes you, feel really great and that you're passionate about. And I was passionate about what I was doing at United Way, but I was expected to go to medical school. And so after about 3 or 4 years there, I eventually did go. I applied. I was at Drexel MCP Hahnemann. And, I was fulfilling my grandmother's dream of having a doctor in the family, but I hated it right away. I was bribing myself to go to anatomy and classes. By day, I was a medical student. By night, I was a Mac Pro artist. I do Fashion Week. It was so much science. I had to literally leave to do the art stuff, the fashion stuff. That's what the marketing, was still driving me. And eventually I dropped out. I was just like, this is terrible. I don't want to do it. But I dropped out I had already taken boards. I was already going into my 4th year. And I just was like, this isn't getting any better.
You did 4 years of medical school.
I did 3.5.
So yes. Do you remember the day that you said, I'm not coming back? What was that like for you? How did you tell your family and friends?
I think it was liberating. I cut all my hair off too. So I think they also were that was my first, if you will, big chop. I never had a perm, but that was the first time I cut my hair to that short, where it was a boy cut. And I was like, I'm good. I guess I had my first, snap, if you will, on I've been living this life for other people. Even though the 4 other people includes my old self, that 8-year-old girl who said you're going to be a neurosurgeon. And since I never like to not do what I say, I was holding myself to it. And I had to let go of that. And I feel like, I had to let go of it. And I was holding myself to it because I am really good at science and I am really good at math. And as a brown girl, I feel like, I held on my shoulders a lot of this, you need to show people that you can look like you and be genius at this shit. Excuse my language.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But I finally had to let go of it. And when I did, it was such a release. I felt so relieved. I felt like it was a rebirth, if you will. And it was hard. My mom was behind me all the way. She's one of those people where I would talk to her the way I'm talking to you right now, explain what I'm thinking. And she was never one to be judgmental because she herself lived, on multiple paths. She was dynamic and she was like, listen, Dasheeda, if that's what you need to do. My husband at the time, he had already suffered through a lot. He was like, what the hell is going on? You've been like, we had a baby. He was already like, I'm like super dad because you've been at the library or in the lab or at the hospital all these times, all these years. And it was hard for me to walk away, but mostly because I didn't feel like I was going to do a good service, as it is a service role. And I was getting jaded because it's really not for a lot of people who are in it. And it bothered me that I was working under these people. I'm an AKA, so I'm not afraid of the haze, but you're not going to haze me and then do such poor job giving care to really poor Black people. I worked in a lot of the Philadelphia hospitals and I saw crazy stuff.
Wait, who was hazing you? You get hazed in medical school?
Oh, yes, you absolutely do. And I see there's a need for some of it because your you have to be available in certain spaces of your brain that most people don't use if their adrenaline's going. If there's crazy stuff happening around, there are people where your brain just shuts down unless you're trained in recall and under stress. And that's all medical school is. It's like recall, under stress.
Wait, sorry, I'm here so recall, what's that term mean for people who don't know what that means?
Like remembering what to do and the right steps.
Okay, I should know that.
Okay, but like it's life or death right now, and so there's that's not for everyone, and you can get to a point where you are trained. But I do think there's an element of you need to be under some duress, and at the end of the day, you're not the pen that's signing it. There's always someone 3 people ahead of you. So in order to simulate that a little bit, they basically will haze you. But I do feel like there's still a lot of racism. There's still a lot of sexism in the medical community. And so that doesn't mean everybody's getting hazed the same. You're not line sisters, line brothers. Like, it ain't that. It is whatever they feel as something arbitrary. And so, that's a general, my experience. I was still a good student. I mostly didn't have an issue. I watched other people get bullied and that bothered me, but I also watched really poor service for poor people of color.
Can you explain that a little bit more and like how that, seeing that, how that impacted you?
Well, I mean, first of all, I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn. And so I'm from the hood. We use the hospital emergency room, primary care. And there's a lot of mistrust within, the community and the hospitals, mostly because you're not seeing someone that looks like you on the other side. I felt, it's still the case that there aren't a lot of us in the medical community more than it used to be. But I felt like, I had to represent, and I mean represent on both sides. I was seeing, my friends, if you will, remembering what it's like to go into the hospital, even as a family, and kind of trying to get something. And at the same time, I was also, seeing the doctor side, and I was feeling like it was an incongruence in terms of what the type of service, preventative care, and overall, even like a customer service kind of experience. It was disheartening. There were a lot of people. I went to medical school. I was like, you can never be like my grandmother's doctor, like not never. And it's because I can tell that you're not in it for the purpose of actually improving someone's outcome. You see a check, or you see a career or some sort of prestige with it. And that was what I struggled with. I didn't have that. They kept telling me by the time I got to 3rd year, because I was so good with people, that I would love it more, but it actually made me, hate it more because I saw under hood, and I was just like, this is not for me. I'm going to wind up burning this whole building down. I was like, this is crazy. It wasn't good. I felt like I was aging a lot faster, missing on my life on my son. And I wasn't passionate about it. So I left, and it took some time for my family to get used to that idea. But you can make a turnaround plan. You can make strategic plans for yourself. I'm a planner by nature. And so even though I left, I probably took about 6 months where I was like, I really don't know what the hell I'm going to do. But I took that time to really consider what I did best. And I still worked for Mac. I still did a lot of freelance makeup. And then I was styling by this point. And so I just kept that going. And then I realized that I knew the website stuff too. And before you knew it, I had a business that I was basically like doing, like the Forever 21 first website iteration. Yes.
Wait, you did? You did Forever 21's first?
Absolutely. I worked on that project. How did
that happen? So walk us through those first few months, those first few years after leaving medical school. How did you develop those skill sets that you already were strong in and use them to build this new part of your life?
Like I said earlier, I bribed myself. So I spent a lot of time still developing relationships, even though I didn't work a lot. Like some girls just worked a lot. I was very strategic about when I worked. I was doing a lot of assisting on shoots, and that's how I got to know people. And when you have a big personality and you are at the same time gracious and helpful, and like it, people want to have you on their projects, even if you're not the best at what you do. But I happen to also be a person who is a logical creative. And so that makes for an excellent assistant or even a manager of the assistants, because I could take what you did, which is you created a masterpiece. But what I did is I watched what the process was and I broke it down and I could get 10 other people to do it. And so that makes me good backstage. And then the same thing with some of my numbers, I have a little bit of obsessive compulsiveness. And so my order in styling, like how you stage things, I will, I have that type of eye, and symmetry, like those type of things really bother me. And that people pick up on that right away, your level of perfection. And so I kept getting more jobs. I actually started turning down jobs because I was in medical school. Once I started going on the wards, I couldn't really do anything but maybe a fashion week because it was in New York. I could take the train up. But it was beginning to get to the point where I had an actual side business. I actually picked up a couple other artists under me that I worked with, and they seemed to struggle with the booking aspect. And since I was person of relationship, I didn't. So I was always like, okay, well, I can't do that. I can't go to Miami because guess what? I'm doing my surgery rotation. So you're lucky I'm even talking to you right now on the phone. But I have someone. And once I started doing that, it became very much like now I have a little team. I don't know how, I can't say I did that like so strategically, but I think that was the innate ability in me to sort of say, I know people, but then I also see people who are talented and they're struggling because they haven't figured out that know people part, and I can connect it. And, and I build trust with them, and I think that whole piece was all relationship. And eventually these assistants and these jobs lead to someone becoming in-house. And so when you're doing something where you're the in-house stylist for Forever 21, you remember that, Dasheeda maybe helped you get a job at some point. And so when you want to do something new and different, like help them design a website because they don't have shopability now on the web, that's something that you can actually do and propose. And I didn't get paid very much. I feel like the project was something that was very like first level, and it's since blown up. I can't say, okay, I look at the site, I'm like, oh, I see what I've worked on. But I think, I do say like, hey, I helped them realize that, yes, they have a great in-store presence. And I know their assortment at the time, it was real fast fashion. So it's changing a lot. And they didn't want to be like tied to this like speed up and update, but you can inspire. And so it was more content inspired, but it still was needed, and it helped them build their reputation, further their brand.
What year was that?
This is 2008, 2009, because I left medical school in 2007.
Okay. Yeah. So once you were doing this freelance, you were getting, you were working with artists, you were working for Mac, you were doing some freelance styling. Did you then think, hey, maybe I should go the corporate route? Maybe I should get like a full-time job working at a company?
I did, but I didn't feel like anybody would take me seriously because I already contended with the fact basically this is how you not get a job in fashion. Tell somebody that you graduated from Princeton with a degree in molecular biology. Like my resume didn't. Tell somebody you dropped out of medical school. They'll be like, "What are you talking about? You're not qualified." But I felt like I was qualified from the business side, and that I had proven that I had enough creative experience and a flair. I had eye, if you will, and taste level, right? Those are the things that you hear from the creative side. But I didn't feel like I had proven enough business experience. I could run a little P&L, and I did make a little run out of my business. The naming, here's a perfect example. My first name in business is called Chocolate Cherries. Girl, bye. Why would you?
Sorry.
Girl, bye.
Oh, were you selling cherries? Chocolate cherries? Were you selling that?
No, I wasn't. What I was retarded because somebody nicknamed me that on some shoot because I'm a dark-skinned girl who's attractive. And you're like, oh, you like a chocolate cherry. And why did I think that somehow it rang it for me, and I kept it. And so then it was all of the people that worked with me were beautiful women of color who were, basically we're all our own chocolate cherries. And so it was a thing. Like we had a team that was very attractive. And that to me was the way it was kind of positioned, but the name. And then if I think about it now as an almost 40-year-old, I'm like, girl, what was you selling for real? And I think there were times I had to even explain it. I learned so much when I decided to go get my MBA and start dealing with real corporate structures and real corporate branding and those, steps and processes required to do that. Because there are things I just didn't even ask myself in that first iteration. For now, I don't put that on my resume. I just say I was an entrepreneur, and you can leave it at that. But I'm definitely like, if they ask you, what could you do differently? I would have named that something else.
Yeah, but you have to, I feel like in all of our journeys, we have those missteps, or we have those things where we're like, wait, why did I ever do that? But if you had never done that, you may have never learned that lesson, right?
Absolutely. I did see what you just asked. I saw the potential. And so I didn't stay out of school long. I went to business school at Rutgers to get my MBA in 2009.
Was it worth it?
Well, it was free, and they paid me. Honestly, I have loans like I went to medical school and got an MD. So I knew that if I wanted to go to get my MBA, that I was going to have to go for free because there was no way I was going to be able to stack on top of that $250K I already picked up. So I felt like Rutgers treated me the way I needed to be treated. I was a big fish in a small pond. I'm a distinguished alumni. I feel like I definitely am able to, gain access in places that maybe I wouldn't have if I was one of 1,000 at Wharton, which is a school that I considered, but they weren't trying to give me any money. So it was like a no. But I really did get very customized education for what I wanted to do, that digital focused fashion, retail, anything that came their way, even sniffed their way like a little bit, that had any of those things, they automatically thought of me. And that meant I got all first look of things. And of course, I was coming to win, and I show up and show out. And so I was able to get some things. And we did a lot of firsts there. Myself and another girlfriend, Patrice, we were the first people to ever do a J&J internship from Rutgers Business School. And then I got a P&G one, which was also the first offer. It was a lot of first, and knowing that we are part of a brand that's just building. I'm proud to see where they are now, like 7 years later, nearly. It's just a great program that's been expanding. And I will say it was worth it because Rutgers is also one of the biggest employers in the state of New Jersey. And as I now, we start talking about cannabis, like New Jersey is about to be legal, and they're going to be one of my biggest partners. And they're willing to listen to me because I was educated by them, and not just educated, I was distinguished top of the class. And so they're open eyes and ears and saying, hey, what should we be looking for to do to capitalize? So I think that's why it's been worth it. It's sort of the universe kind of coming together in a great way.
If you could think back about one big lesson you learned about entrepreneurship, about business, about what it takes to scale and grow, what do you think was one thing that really stands out from your business school experience?
Definitely taking the time to do a plan. is important. And I say this even though I school myself on many things that plans are not all the way done. But I feel like that was one of the biggest lessons. And so business plan for sure. But your team and how and the synergy that in your team. I did not love first year, even though I did well in business school. But first year is a lot of you just get assigned a team. Yeah, man. That can change the nature of how well, how difficult that road is to an A. Because everybody wants to get the A, but the road there can be really, smooth when you have synergies. And it's, even though you're working hard, it's still like it's good times, or it can be really rocky. I learned that in my first year. Because second year, I got to pick more of my teams, and it was so much smoother because you understand what people's strengths are, and you're able to kind of make sure your puzzle comes together neatly. So I would say those are the two things. Because if you don't have that, you're not going to, what's the foundation that you build upon?
That is so true. So true. But I kind of want to segue a little bit because I feel like we could definitely spend a lot of time talking about that part of your career, but I definitely want to get into where you are now. So take us to, I think it's around the year 2014 when your mom was getting sick, right? She had cancer, right?
Around 2014, she was actually getting better.
Okay.
She was now in remission, and we were leaving Minnesota. I had been at Target after business school for about three and a half years, and I really enjoyed my time there. And I became like what I call myself now, like sort of this superstar gunner who understands how to put a team. They have great training. It was time to leave because I really moved back for love, to be honest. Love that didn't work out, unfortunately. But yeah, my mom was getting better, and she moved to Georgia. I moved back to the East Coast and worked for Victoria's Secret, and then followed that with Full Beauty, a lot of tribe stuff during that time. So life was good. I honestly transitioned into the cannabis space really out of sheer universe kind of driving it. My mom died unexpectedly in 2016. And I was in a very nice corporate director role and doing great fun stuff, but I could not go back to regular corporate America. I just didn't feel I was passionate about it. And I felt like with her death, I was thrusted into this role of rising matriarch of my family, if you will. And I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel, and I mean, of course, at 36, you shouldn't feel ready, but I really didn't feel ready, working under this tight corporate structure that dictates when I move. I had made some leaps. I moved faster than most of my counterparts out of business school, but it was not without literally every bit of Oya warrior in me continuing to just push forward like a bull almost, to try to keep getting momentum, keep my momentum, to keep moving forward.
Like at Target and those other places you worked?
Yes, absolutely. Target, I came in and, they expected me to be like, a regular, person that comes in like from the MBA. But I had established myself right away. First of all, they make you take like an IQ test before you come in. And then everybody kind of knows what you do on it because it dictates, it tells you or tells them how far up their chain they think you're going to go.
What?
And HR, yes, it's very interesting. But you know what? That drove me because I was like out the gate already stand out. And that allowed me a little bit more room to be a little bit more Brooklyn there. The VP.
I know what I'm talking about. I don't care how deliberate. I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah. And so the VP told me, hey, we hired Brooklyn. We want Brooklyn. And he was like, plus, you based on the way you performed on this, that you're supposed to be the CEO. So I was like, listen, thank you. I'm down. Thank you for telling me that little intel. And after that, I knew most of the VPs knew that. And so I was able to kind of a little bit squeeze in. I talked a lot of digital, a lot of that. But then, I was also exhausted by the time I went to Victoria's Secret as a director, then Full Beauty. I was tired of playing some of these games. Full Beauty, I mean, I loved my boss and I still love her. But some of the people who worked for me, they had struggled with the director who was a brown girl. They really did. And I struggled with having people who were senior level really have my back. Listen, last time I checked, every person I worked for, I had to adjust to their style. If I'm telling them that I want them to breathe a little bit, do not stay trapped at your desk. Let's move around, use the whole space. We have this beautiful office. And, that's because that's what I need to do too. then they should feel free to do it. Not watch my desk to see or my office to see if I'm in my office, especially if we're making money and we're beating last year and our sales are good. So it's hard. I think sometimes I have an unorthodox way of thinking, and I was tired of beating myself up against the wall to push things. And going back after my mom passed was like, oh, no. So I left. I went to Arizona, and my aunt lived there already, 25 years, and was a medical marijuana patient already. And I'm glad I went there because, of course, she showed me the motherly love and took care of me. But I got to experience the cannabis industry legally from the patient side, and that's the consumer side. And as a consumer marketing expert, my bells and my whistles started to kind of just start going off as soon as I went in the first dispensary. It was a hot mess. And in the sense that how you guys really want someone mainstream to support this experience. It's not going to happen. But I know how we can get this to eventually be on a Target shelf.
Oh, wow. Target shelf. It's so funny because right now you can never think of going to Target to buy cannabis products, right? That's something that I couldn't think of right now. But were you, was this your first introduction to cannabis? Had you been a user, but you were using in private?
I classify myself as sort of the child of the war on drugs. I was a basketball player. I did not use at all during any of the teenage years through college. It wasn't until I was a grown up that I tried it. Really, medical school made me try cigarettes too, because we did pharmacology, and I was like, I will remember this better if I understand how this works in my brain. And there were things that I wanted to try, but I credit one of my boyfriends for my first time smoking in Washington Square Park, and it was like a crazy experience. I felt very, very paranoid, mostly that I was going to be arrested because I felt like I was doing something really, really wrong, because that's how it was portrayed to me. Mm-hmm. Later in life, after I had my son and such, I was comfortable doing it more in a private setting, if we were on vacation that way. But then when I moved to Minnesota, it is negative 10 degree weather and lower sometimes. And I had arthritis, and I really aged, I feel like 10 years internally. And my mom was smoking for years just as a regular consumer, but she basically really now needed it because she was doing chemotherapy. And so I smoked with her one time while I was there, and I slept so much better because I have insomnia, and I felt so much better. My molecular biology bell started going off, and I was like, you know what, let me just start seeing how this works for me. And that became very private. That means I never did it socially because I didn't want anyone to know that I did it at all. I consumed every day. I'm very much a successful stoner. I prefer sativas because I have, like I said, 80 things going on in my head, and an ADD and an OCD, and I can put things in lists, 3 lists at a time. And in order to focus and hone in, there are certain strains that you can use that can really do it. I actually look back, and I would have been a beast if I had this in high school, real talk. But because procrastination and, looking at here and I'm looking there. Yeah, so it is not every strain works the same. And I just started trying to figure out what worked for me. But I didn't become an advocate. I didn't come out the closet, if you will. It wasn't until I actually became a legal patient that I felt comfortable even doing so. Because I'm a rule follower. And so once I did that, I became the WeedHead. And that's sort of my spin on trying to change this really negative perception around what a WeedHead with, my personal brand. And I think most people at this point, any place that I've worked, anywhere that I've been, I'm one of the most productive people that you know. And so if I'm saying I consume every day, you have to at least take a pause and be like, wait, what? Okay. And so then you can hear me, and then my biology background, and then the questions start. And, I'm always like, bring it. You want to talk science? Let's do it. And so this is where I feel like the universe started to make so much sense to me, because I never understood. I used to be like, why did I go to medical school? How much further in my career would I be if I had gone to business school sooner? And I used to think all that. Why do I have a molecular biology degree? Why do I have all this random information? And it's really for this moment, I feel, because I am untouchable, because I don't do bro science. I do real science. I will check somebody very quickly. And I also have a great, list of accolades to kind of go behind my name. It's hard for someone to be like, oh, she just smoking to get high, and, she don't want to do that's you can't, it doesn't go with my brand.
Now, I was just going to say, so how did you said you went into that dispensary that day and you just saw that it was a mess and your brain started turning. What were the next steps? Like, how did you say, I can build a business in this growing industry?
I took the Tribe Called Curl thoughts and model. We had just left that because, again, my mom passed and I missed that a bit. And so I basically went home, immediately called my sister Imani, and I was like, listen, there's a need for us to figure out the same way we ushered in natural hair, because it wasn't always cool to have natural hair. Let's be real. I went to college with an afro. Everybody else had a perm. Mm-hmm. So, but all these people now have natural hair, which is great. I love that. But I feel like we were part of that movement. And so I was like, there is a need here, because I did still see brown girls smoking, and I had gone to Oakland, and there's definitely a very sophisticated vibe is just not being shown. And so my sister, being a storyteller and being able to do that with Tribe, I mean, we went to her and was like, we could probably do some of the same type of things that we did with Tribe here with the digital focused consulting. And then Mary J. Marketing was started. Like, in my mind, I was like, all right, I'm gonna do a consultant because it's just me. I could do that really quickly, and I'll go and pick up a couple clients and, show them how to do more, digital strategy. At the same time, I started the WeedHead.com, which is my blog, and I'm not as good at blogging as I should, but I also started it on like Facebook as a page, mostly to see what I could learn on the back end, because I'd heard so many negative things about cannabis and social media and so on and so forth and being blocked. But it was very much boom, boom, boom. I got there within, I would say a couple of weeks. I had my medical marijuana card. I was shopping that same day. And then 5 days later, Mary J. Marketing was found and, started through LegalZoom. I was very quick through it. I asked my sister if she wanted to be on board as a silent partner, someone I could talk to. Same thing with some of my best friends. I created what I call my THC incubator group of about 25 of what I feel like are the smartest brown folks, that I've met through the years, who wouldn't want to miss out on an opportunity if it was, happening, but they were willing to support my journey. Some supported with cash, and some supported with just keeping me honest about what I was doing. Check-in time, check-in conversations with attorney friends who were like, listen, you need to focus here. No, you need to focus there. And before you know it, I was going to conferences and I was showing that on social media. And the next thing you know, I'm like, oh my God, I have 10,000 people following me on social media. When did this happen? Like, it was very quick. And then I got my first client, and then I knew, okay, this is sort of real, because I started going to those conferences now, not as a person just attending, but I'm now part of that conference because the client is.
What were some of the challenges that you were helping your clients work through, based upon some of the skills you had honed in over the years?
Immediately, the first things are generally around branding. People just kind of not understanding that it's not just the logo, but it's everything, keeping color story consistent. It's all of those things that my OCD really helped kind of hone in early years of helping to put together websites and such for fashion, which I think was one of the first movers on really understanding how to do social media well. So I drawn from a lot of that. From a lifestyle perspective. So creating the digital media brand or experience for a brand that really maybe only was doing text messaging or giving out flyers, things like that. I would say the other thing is, strategic planning. A lot of the cannabis space are people who, let's be honest, they're in some ways previously quote unquote deviant, right? Like sometimes they were previously in a gray market and now they've moved in. And so it's not always the most experienced folks. A lot of people have changed their entire life. Like at one point they maybe worked as a hostess at a restaurant and now they're the CMO of this, cultivation. Well, that doesn't bring in the sales ultimately, So it became just there are gaps in the knowledge for the people who are actually running the companies that are in the business. And I was obviously filling those gaps. I mean, I could fill those gaps in a 10-minute conversation for some folks. And so it was almost too easy for me because I feel like I like to talk and I like to teach. And that's what it seemed like a lot of the clients needed, someone who could tell them what they need to do and even teach them or train them.
So were you getting clients easily?
Initially, I was getting clients easily to be leads. A client, though, or a client lead, isn't always translating to a paying client. And that was the challenge. Everybody wanted to offer equity. Everybody had, I don't have full on, finance. Finance will happen. I finally got a client that I thought could pay. And I talk about this client in Undo the Truth on my page, the WeedHead.com, but that client was completely fraudulent. You have to weed through, especially in the cannabis space, I feel like on the West Coast, you're weeding through legitimate and illegitimate business people, and it is a challenge. And it is a challenge because you also have to remember that for me, especially, it's the first time you can consume kind of comfortably. And that still is one of those things you only do with your closest people. And so sometimes you're feeling like almost a false sense of closeness with your clients, which is, never good either. So there's a lot of pitfalls that you can avoid, or I tried to avoid, but I honestly, I did fall right into one. The last 6 months have been really a testament in my turnaround of business leadership capabilities because we did so. The first 6 months were really challenging after I picked up a couple clients because nobody was really paying. Everybody was wanting to pay in equity. And I think when you think about the big business capability and the growth of the industry, you want to get in on the best ideas. So equity does sound still pretty good, especially if you know you're going to be putting your manpower behind it. I knew if I help launch this, it's going to do well, but people have to actually uphold their end of the deal and do the things they need to do too. So it was the challenge. I was living out my savings, and I definitely had a nice little nest egg, but it quickly dwindled because I let go of a mainstream client to be able to focus on this bigger client that I thought could pay. And within 2 months of being on quote unquote retainer with them, it was already a hot mess and going downhill very quickly.
One thing I admire about your story is just how you think about just the industry itself, right? Being a Black woman, working in the cannabis industry, when already cannabis is already something that has been so stigmatized within our community. What would you say to that person who may be outside, who may be like a minority in an industry that's already minority? I think in your one of your past interviews, you talked about it, about these white space opportunities and how to really hone in and get started in these niche industries. What would you say to somebody who has identified this niche industry but isn't really sure about how to stand out and build their brand within it?
Well, the first is I feel like part of the reason why I'm in the industry is because I was, again, with the way the universe worked out, I was destined to do so. Because to your point, there aren't a lot of us. And I feel like, Black folks in general are reluctant to believe people, period, right? When they've been taught something. And I think that I'm the type of person, since I'm the best our tribe has to offer, if you will, and I'm humbly so, I'm that person that has to come back with the message. But I think in terms of people who are now coming in, next wave, absolutely there are opportunities for you to do this as a side hustle. The number one thing you can do to be in the industry and build your brand is be an advocate. Number one. Most of the quote unquote stars in our industry right now are the loudest advocates, the first people who are up and lobbying. And the truth is that's also what I've seen as a transition for every state that has gone legal. If you're part of the legalization efforts and advocacy efforts, if you're paying attention, you'll be able to see when things are happening and slot yourself in appropriately. Of course, there are no people of color really as part of those efforts. It's generally the people who are sometimes considered outcasts for years and years, very hippie lifestyle, love and light. And they were like, oh, yeah, he's already da, da, da. that's old Jack over there, blah, blah. Like, I feel like I've been to 18 states that's exactly how that happens. And I'm honest, I'm being real, like, but there's no Dasheeda. There's no brown folks really. And I feel like I'm not only coming with a brown folk perspective, I'm actually coming with the whole mainstream perspective too. So without us in the industry, it will stay this sort of either overly hippie or overly hip hop focused type of industry, and that's not moving it towards the mainstream. The mainstream is not there, and that's the old negative perception. So the way you build your brand is to really be something fresh and new, and not continue to give into perpetuating the stereotype. And I struggle with that when I came up with the WeedHead, which is why I have an alter ego, if you will, which is the cannabis CEO. And I think that is more, reflective in my social media, because I know that there's still that negative connotation with the WeedHead. I didn't want to sound like hypocritical. Okay, you can't do some of these old references, but I do think that holds the industry back. And anybody who is coming into the industry and doing that, know that there's already quite a bit of that. Where you stand out is where you start looking more at the education piece, advocacy, real branding that's not like trademark infringement. Where you stand out is when you start thinking about the science, not bro science, I call it, but real science.
Well, can you tell, I think this would be a good time for you to, 3 things you wish people knew about cannabis that they don't, or 3 myths, 3 stereotypes that you just wish people would stop saying when it comes to cannabis.
So the number one thing that I wish people knew is that this is illegal simply because of a major government propaganda campaign that really was racially influenced. If you look at Henry Anslinger, he was basically the equivalent of the Attorney General at the time, or the FBI director. He essentially was basically like, reefer, really makes the darkies think that they're white. This was sort of the premise of that whole campaign in the 1940s time period. It was a campaign against Black folks and Hispanic folks, so Black and brown folks. And so the number one thing is, this is not illegal because it's bad for you, no matter how many war on drugs commercials you watch during the Reagan era. It's illegal because white people at the time in the early part of America, which we already, we all kind of, I guess, discuss how shady it is, but white people, felt like it was problematic for how the populations that they were trying to control acted and behaved. And they used all types of propaganda. They had pamphlets that would show white women with a black devil and saying, when she smokes it, she wants to have orgies and have sex. And it was,
wow.
Yes, you can Google it and you can find all types of information. They were very explicit about making people fearful about what marijuana, the devil's, herb, did. That's in fact what they called it. So that's the number one thing. This is not illegal in the United States, which, by the way, is the reason why it's illegal all over, by the way, even though the United States will be one of the last to kind of probably do it federally. But it's not illegal because it's bad for you. It's illegal because, as per usual, there's some racial reasons and also financial and economic reasons. Another reason why it remains illegal, just to like 1B, is because of financial, not so much racial, but financial. The pharmaceutical companies got a lot to lose. Alcohol companies got a lot to lose. Cigarette companies got a lot to lose. And they are basic foundation of the American economy. Yeah. So this is what I want people to understand. That's one. Number 2, it is actually not only that it's not bad for you, it is actually really good for you. We all have a natural endocannabinoid system. It is the largest body of receptors in our body. And believe it or not, you don't even learn about it in medical school. You know what you learn about the endocannabinoid system? If someone comes in with it being activated, it means they smoke weed. And that means you need to call somebody from social services, because if they got kids, or you're going to call police, whoever you got to report it. That's what you learn in medical school. You don't learn about the actual system. The endocannabinoid system is about homeostasis, which is another word for balance. And especially in the African American community, the majority of our ailments are due to imbalance of certain things: sugar, diabetes, blood pressure, high blood pressure. It just, the list goes on. And so this was medicine way, way back in the day. It got taken away, and it actually is medicine today. And people leverage it today in Israel for cancer, for epilepsy. There's a viral video of a man who has Parkinson's, and he literally cannot stop shaking until he has his cannabinoid treatment. We are ignorant in the United States because it's been illegal, and so you can't do research on it. Everybody has an endocannabinoid, even your pets. So it's good for them too.
Wait, you can give your dogs or your pets weed?
You can. I mean, so there are many parts of the marijuana plant, and there are over 100 cannabinoids in the plant, but we only talk about the THC because that's the part that impacts the receptors in your head and makes you quote unquote high. But there's another really important cannabinoid called CBD, and it is one that does not make you high, but it has very, very similar benefits as THC throughout the whole body, except the head. And so, you can give your pet CBD to help with anxiety, over scratching, help with their appetite, their muscles, everything that we have, maybe the same ailments, because they have a endocannabinoid system as well. So, and if you haven't ever consumed and you have an endocannabinoid system, guess what? By definition, you are deficient in cannabinoids. So you are cannabinoid deficient because you haven't actually activated that system. The system controls a lot of shit like sleep, anxiety, your hunger. It's basically anything that could be out of whack. And it's a shame. It really is a shame. I think the third thing that I would say is that we really, as people of color, should be advocating for it, because more than half of the drug arrests in the United States have come from marijuana arrests. And this is the reason why we have the number of incarcerated Black and Hispanic males that we have now. They are arrested on average at a 5-to-1 ratio, even though there's no proof that we consume any more than the white population. So the third thing is, this is a social justice issue. We have ruined families, generations, by incarcerating people for very small amounts, that even now today in Brooklyn, the law has changed. People still getting arrested. People still getting targeted. Law has changed. It's decriminalized. You really shouldn't get more than a ticket, but you're still getting arrested. And sent to places like Rikers, which, by the way, you could spend one day there and come back and literally not be the same. Yeah. So, it's so much bigger than people just want to get high. I agree about the smell. I'm not a big fan. So for you, the fourth bonus is there are other ways besides the edible. And besides smoking it with the smell, you can vape it. There are tinctures. You can put, there are airs, these little, the pumps, like if you have asthma, the asthma pumps, so they're inhalers. There are many ways. There's patches. I have a cream that I use, and I showed it on my social media. The before and after is amazing on my son. It works on acne because it's anti-inflammation. And so a pimple is nothing but an inflamed area. And so it is not a miracle. It's just science, but we're just behind because it's been illegal.
But with with anything, there always can be people who abuse it, right? Is it possible to abuse cannabis?
Yes. And I would say it's possible to abuse anything. Like, everything can go to an excess. Mm-hmm. I do feel that if you got to the point where you have to consume so much THC in order for you to feel the effect that you feel makes you normal, then you need to have an endocannabinoid cleanse. So the same way you can be deficient, you can be overstimulated too, which means that your receptors are pretty much full all the time. And so you have to have an insane amount of additional THC put in for you to actually feel anything. And that means your receptors probably need to be cleaned. I'm actually working on a product that is something of that nature. And again, this is the molecular biology. I mean, I can't talk too much about it, but basically, I feel like, there are people who over the years have gotten accustomed to heavy usage. They have never necessarily tried to manage their need on a microdosing. And I think that's the way of the future. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to help us get this more mainstream, is really understanding the microdosing. I'm a microdoser. That means I'm a one-hit wonder. If there are people who out there who are listening who consume, no, I don't smoke blunts like that. I'm not going to smoke anybody out. I'm not. But I consume all day.
How does it feel to now stumble upon this new passion of yours? You went to medical school and it didn't work out. You tried the corporate marketing route. You learned some things, but now you're here. Like, how does it just feel on that individual level to be at this point in your life?
It's a little bit of I'm scared, because I just feel like this is big risk. It is not little risk. It's not just I'm trying to start a business, but I'm trying to start a business in an industry that is still illegal in some of the states of the United States and still illegal federally. And so I am every day scared, but I respond to that adrenaline rush differently. I get like I was in medical school, buttoned up. What's recall? Like, what do I got to do? I get that same vibe, that same feeling when I was in basketball, playing. If it's the fourth quarter and we were down by a little bit, I'm scared we're going to lose. It's like, okay, I got to cross over and keep it moving. I have, a sense of empowerment too, because I know the truth and I feel like I have science to back me up, and I have skills that I've picked up over the years that I never thought would all make sense in one place. And it does. So it's a combination. I think some days, and maybe that's every entrepreneur, some days I feel like, I do not know that I can do this anymore. I quit. And by the end of the day, it may be completely different because we scored a good contact, or I got a mention, or a certain type of press, or whatever it is that will, make me feel like I'm moving forward. If nothing else, I do feel like I am fulfilling a purpose that I know my mother would be proud of too. And in fact, probably I think she's up there like she used to do a praise dance, and I feel like she's doing a praise dance all day because she loved consuming with us. It wasn't something I would offer her as an option for me often, because I didn't think it was, all the way appropriate, even though we did it a couple of times. But it was still weird because I'm like, I'm not supposed to be doing this, and I'm not supposed to be doing it with you. But I'm glad we did get that experience, because she enjoyed it, I know. And so this is sort of even validation and legitimacy for her experiences with it too. So,
does the rest of your family do they support you with what you're doing, or have you had people who haven't supported you, and how have you responded to that?
Thankfully, my family does support me. I feel like I said I have shown myself to be some of the best of what my tribe as my family has to offer, and humbly stepping up into a matriarch role. I feel very supported by my sisters for sure, as they are in the business with me in the partnership way. And, my aunt and my uncle, my mom's siblings, my aunts and uncle, they are supportive. They see what is done for me and, my own health. And I feel like they know that I wouldn't do anything too crazy. I have yet to encounter someone who has challenged me like for real. But that might be because they see my Brooklyn and my Afro and they don't want none. You know what I mean? Like, there are days that I do have to bring out the Brooklyn. Honestly, the biggest challenges come from sometimes within the industry. There are quite a few characters, and, people like to talk on social media. So that's, in that way, I'm living my own real, reality show, Real Housewives kind of show, where you got the same players or characters all the time, and people sometimes want to hate. So that may be the biggest challenge, but nobody has said to me like, girl, you crazy, what are you doing? There's always a pause, and I think I knew that. That's why I feel like this is the calling for me, because if you know my background, then you know that it has to be something serious that has made my shift.
So if you had to predict, where will cannabis be in 2 years? What would you say? In the U.S.?
I really think we're moving towards federal legalization. We have the Marijuana Justice Act that Senator Cory Booker just put out this year. I didn't expect it this year, I'll be honest, but with all the craziness going on in politics, I think he wanted to make sure it kind of got in while it's kind of noisy, because it means that people aren't really bothering with that too much. I imagine I predicted 18 months ago that right now bigger companies would start looking on how they're positioning themselves, and they absolutely are. You have bigger testing companies. I'm talking about mainstream ones. You have bigger pharmaceutical companies. You have bigger CPG companies, and they're all doing their due diligence in preparation for what I feel like is about 2020, seeing things in their assortment. CBD right now is legal in all 50 states, although there's some question, if you will, about what the DEA thinks of CBD in terms of it being a Schedule 1 substance. But it is being sold online, and CBD is cannabis, and it is the basis of at least opening conversations with suburban moms like myself about what's the need for it. And so that if I have it my way and I get to do what I'm doing in the next 2 years, that will be how we hack in the mainstream with personal care products, pet products, and you'll start seeing them on the shelf. I mean, we already have some CBD products in Whole Foods, and I believe, like I said, Walmart just was Walmart.com had a rosin press online for sale. For a hot second, Target.com had a CBD product, but then they decided to take it down. I guess they got a letter real quick from. But I mean, my point is that people are testing the waters now, and it's only a matter of time. I think the pet stores have the best opportunity, especially if you are headquartered in a state that already is legal, like Petco. You can absolutely start looking at some of the CBD infused for your pets, and it works. And I think that that's where this is headed. It's going to be very global. Every month, a new country decriminalizes or legalizes. South Africa is legal now. I'm really excited about that. Jamaica as well. I mean, these are places where you're like, oh my gosh, what would happen if we actually figure out what we can do with this from an economic perspective and revitalization perspective. I'm hoping that we have less people incarcerated and that incarceration rate goes down, simply because if 50% of the incarcerations for drugs are for marijuana, then some of these people just need to be let out, and you shouldn't be picking up no more, right? And so, right. Yeah, that's what I see as the future right now.
What about the underground market? And I just say, like, let's say people who are like weed dealers, right? Like, how do you think that will be impacted? I know a few. I know. Like, are they entrepreneurs? You know what I mean? Like,
I think that they are. I think it depends. I would encourage them to figure out how to go from, bail to bud, which is I coined that. I'm actually trying to do a program where I can help people come from like the system and figure out how to be in bud for real. But I think that it's hard. I think that for the states that have gone legal, there are probably still gray markets, if you will, that exist. And the quality, the pricing is a lot higher because the risk is a lot higher. Because most of the states, if you have a legalized state, they've put so many, regulations in place. And even for the people who are consuming, it's almost like, if you're doing it under the table, the penalties are really, really harsh. There's probably still some gray market folks that are using their money to lobby against legalization in other states. And so I would encourage them to not do that, figure out how to be an advocate, figure out how to, create some sort of cushion in your business, if you will, to be able to transition. I think everybody deserves an opportunity, and I feel it's so shameful that we're choosing to leave out the very people that were wrongfully persecuted, incarcerated all this time. And sadly, for I don't know, it's sad that it's mostly Black and Hispanics that are being left out.
So if you had to think about, legacy, what are you all doing this for? Like, what keeps you going when you feel like giving up?
I think definitely legacy with my son. I have a 14-year-old son, and I homeschooled him for the last 4 years. My mom helped with that for the first 2.5. I want to help create generational wealth, but I also really want him to not have to deal with the same struggles that I dealt with as I was in my journey through college. But I was in college with like 8 jobs. Like I did Tiger Patrol, I did the shuttle, I worked for Mac at the counter over at Quicker Bridge Mall. Like I was literally, and I just felt it was such a struggle. I enjoyed college still, but I'm wanting to provide for him this, oasis of opportunity, because I just don't think little Black boys and girls actually get that. I really also am about my community. And I think going back to Brooklyn after being on the West Coast reminded me that I'm about my community. I definitely am still a girl from East New York. I struggle with seeing the neighborhood still look in some way very terrible and not necessarily improved. I look at Newark, I look at Trenton, I look at these areas that I've spent a lot of time in, whether in living or in business school, and they need revitalization. And I am a P&L person. And I know that what I've seen in the States on the West, I can bring that here and help revitalize communities. In fact, I'm in Wisconsin for a project and a potential long-term partnership that involves all of that. And I'm learning so much. And that's what drives me, is that I feel like I'm creating opportunity for something larger than me.
Thank you so much, Dasheeda. This has been such a pleasure getting to learn a lot about the cannabis industry that I didn't know, and just learning about your own journey. And hopefully, I know, not even hopefully, I know you will be an inspiration to a lot of our dream drivers listening in who have these unique interests and who are scared about where their path will take them, right? Because maybe somebody listening in may have decided to quit their job and they don't know what's next. I think your story is just a testament to you'll figure it out, right? Yes. And those interests of yours that you've always had, they matter, even if you don't figure out, even if you don't yet know how or why they'll show up in your life later on.
Absolutely. Maintain relationships. That's what I say is the biggest lesson here. And always do good work, no matter which area you're in.
So let's go into our lightning round, Dasheeda. So at this point, I'm going to give you a prompt, and I want you to tell me the first word that comes to mind, okay? And we're going to be sticking with our whole dreams and drive metaphor.
Okay.
All right. So the first word is park.
I think, like, hold up.
Reverse.
I used to say this all the time. Rewind. Because it's like, wait, what? Bring that back again.
Neutral.
I'm rarely this, to be perfectly honest. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. It's like, you're not neither here nor there.
And then last but not least, drive.
I think of Dasheeda, to be honest. That's always been synonymous with my name.
In order to be a dream driver, you have to have your keys to success. So tell us 3 things that you think every dream driver needs in their toolkit before they hit the road.
I would say absolutely, number 1, just your integrity, right? So that is doing the right thing even when people aren't watching, because you don't have a boss when you're an entrepreneur. And so to have that sort of work integrity and personal integrity, so you make sure you have that balance for yourself. Confidence, absolutely, is sort of something I wear. I feel like if you look good, you feel good, and then you do good. And so I think always bringing your confidence, and that's like a head to toe confidence. So I believe in styling for the moment as well. The third is I go back to team. I am on a crazy journey right now. And if I'm not here in Wisconsin by myself. And so if I had not had the team around me that I'd have had, I don't know that I would have made it through the rocky first 6 months and had that great turnaround. I have a group of people who are loyal and ready to run up a hill with me, and okay taking my lead, and me feeling comfortable being led by them.
What advice would you give to a dream driver who's building a team? What are some core things you have to do? You should keep in mind.
Do your due diligence. Not everybody, comes wrapped up in a perfect package ready for you, right? Do your due diligence, and it's not to necessarily chop somebody down, but know what you're bringing on board, and so that you can actually choreograph your strategy to the way they move. I like to choreograph to the way people move in real life choreography, dancing, but also strategy, because it's more natural. And so do your due diligence and background on anyone that you bring on board, to ensure you're understanding where their strengths are and where their opportunities are, and you can play that piece of the puzzle much better.
Thank you so much, Dasheeda. Can you tell our dream drivers where we can find you online if we want to learn more about what you're doing and what you're up to?
Absolutely. You can find me on the WeedHead.com. That is my blog, and you can definitely reach me there. On social media, I am the Cannabis CEO on Instagram and on Twitter. And I'm just Dasheeda Dawson on Facebook. I have a profile page there that you can also find me as well.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you for having me. Finally, I'm so glad we were able to do it. Go Tigers.
All right, so that's a wrap for episode 123 with Dasheeda. I hope that you enjoyed hearing her dream driving journey as well as her keys to success. Don't forget to enter our giveaway this week. Remember, we are partnering with Dope Queens Cosmetics to give away 4 lipsticks from their lipstick collection. To enter, all you have to do is go to dreamsanddrive.com/win. That's dreamsanddrive.com/win. And one winner is going to win all 4 lipsticks. So make sure you go now and enter before you forget. Our show notes are available at dreamsanddrive.com. Just click on episode 123 and make sure you are following us on social. We are Dreams and Drive on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'm pretty active on all 3 platforms, so make sure you're following us across the board and use the hashtag Dreams and Drive if you want to engage with other people, you want to send a tweet, mention us. I always get in, I always respond. And I love it when you guys share on Instagram stories or screenshot that you're listening to this episode. That's my favorite way right now to go in and engage. So if you haven't already, screenshot this right now and post it. So I want to take some time really quickly to read a review of the week. I am so grateful that you guys are going in and leaving reviews. If you haven't already, just go to Apple Podcasts, press leave a review, and your review might be read on next week's episode. This one is coming from Shanisi. I've been praying for some kind of sign, then I found this podcast. I've been binge listening and I love it because there are tips for every entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur. If you can't find a mentor in your life, you'll definitely find some great mentors in this podcast series. Can't wait to get all caught up. Love from Barbados. Thank you, Shanice. And this one is coming from S. Aaron. Enlightening. Raina's podcast is so relevant at this time in my life as I'm building my brand. She provides inspiring guests that share their real life experiences, advice, and wisdom learned from their journey. It encourages you to keep pushing towards your goals regardless of the obstacles. I want to say that Shalene, because I recognize the last name. Thank you guys. Make sure that you also are part of our Dreams and Drive Facebook group. Like, we're about to do some great things in our Facebook group in 2018, so you want to make sure you're a part of it. Just go to dreamsanddrive.com/Facebook, or you can just search Dream Driver Mastermind the next time you are logged in. So I'm getting ready for the last episode of the year, and I want to make it a Q&A, reflection on the new year. I'm also trying to bring my dad on the show if he ever lets me. He said he would, then we weren't able to record the podcast on the day that he said he would. But if you have questions that you want to ask me for the last episode of the year, you can either tweet me, send me an Instagram DM, or just send me an email, raina@dreamsanddrive.com. And you know what? I want to share this thing with you because I was listening to a podcast today. It's called the motherfucking MF CEO Project or something like that. And one of the things that the host said that I just really, really want to repeat to you all because it spoke to me is make sure your goals are big. Make sure that you are setting goals for yourself that other people would laugh at, that you might even laugh at because they're just so big and audacious. And sometimes when you have these big goals, you'll push yourself to achieve more than you ever thought. And even if you don't reach the goal, you're going to be able to achieve more than if you had just no goal at all. So think big. If you have a goal, think even bigger because you never really know what you'll be able to achieve. Keep dreaming, keep driving, and we'll chat again in episode 124.